The hospital room smelled of antiseptic and old wood. Outside the frosted window, snow fell soft and steady over Denver, each flake a white ghost drifting through the December twilight. The radiator clanked and hissed in the corner, but the cold still found its way through the glass, creeping along the sill like something alive. Silas Thornwood lay propped against three pillows, his body small beneath the white sheets. At 112 years old, he looked like a man carved from driftwood, worn smooth by a century of weather and memory. His hands rested on the blanket, knuckles thick as walnuts, fingers bent with age but still strong enough to grip. His eyes, pale blue and rheumy, watched the snow with an expression that might have been longing or might have been peace. Beside the bed sat his great-grandson, Samuel Jr., 16 years old and restless with youth. The boy had been there for an hour, fidgeting with his baseball cap, glancing at the clock, waiting for permission to leave. But something in the old man's stillness kept him seated, kept him quiet. "Grandpa Silas," Samuel said finally, his voice breaking the silence like a stone dropped in still water. "Did you ever love anyone? I mean, really love them?" The old man's eyes shifted from the window. For a moment, he said nothing. Then a smile touched his lips, small and taut and full of things the boy could not yet understand. "Once," Silas whispered. His voice was like wind through dry grass. "One time, and it changed everything." He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were brighter, focused on something far beyond the hospital walls, beyond the snow, beyond time itself. "It was the winter of 1878, he said, "the coldest winter in 20 years. The winter God put me where I needed to be." The boy leaned forward. The room grew quiet. And in that quiet, the past came rushing back. The wind came down from the peaks like a living thing, howling and hungry and mean. It drove the snow horizontal across the ridge, erasing hoof prints in seconds, turning the world into a white void where sky and earth became one. The temperature had dropped to 35 below, cold enough to freeze spit before it hit the ground, cold enough to kill a man in minutes if he lost his way. Silas Thornwood sat tall in the saddle, his broad shoulders hunched against the gale. He was 32 years old, 6 feet 3 inches of muscle and bone wrapped in buffalo leather and wool. His coat, the largest in 3 counties, still pulled tight across his chest. His face was hidden behind a thick scarf, but his eyes were visible, gray as winter stone, scanning the white landscape with the patience of a man who knew the mountains did not care whether he lived or died. Beneath him, Ranger snorted and tossed his head. The stallion was 12 years old, black as coal, with a white blaze down his nose and a temperament as steady as bedrock. Silas had raised him from a colt, trained him on the open range, trusted him with his life more times than he could count. Now Ranger's breath came in great plumes of steam, his muscles trembling with cold and effort. They were 3 miles from the cabin, searching for cattle lost in the blizzard. 3 head of stock, young steers worth $40 each if they could be brought to market in the spring. Silas needed that money. The winter had been hard, game scarce, and his stores were running low. But the cattle were secondary now. Something else had caught his attention. A sound, faint at first, almost lost in the wind. Silas pulled Ranger to a halt and listened. The horse's ears swiveled forward. The sound came again, carried on a gust that momentarily cleared the air. A baby crying. Silas felt his chest tighten. It was impossible. There were no settlements within 10 miles, no cabins, no ranches. The only structure on this ridge was his own place, and he lived alone. Had lived alone for 2 years, ever since Adeline left. The cry came again, thin and desperate. Silas touched his heels to Ranger's flanks. The horse moved forward, picking his way carefully through the deep snow. The wind screamed around them. The cry grew louder, joined now by a second voice, then a third. 3 babies wailing in the storm. Silas's heart began to pound. His gloved hand moved to the Winchester rifle slung across his saddle, then dropped away. Whatever waited ahead, a gun would not help. They crested a small rise, and Silas saw it. A fence post, half buried in snow, tilted at an angle like a broken tooth. And tied to that post, arms bound behind her back with rusted barbed wire, was a woman. She wore a nightgown, once white, now brown with dirt and stained with blood. The thin fabric clung to her body, frozen stiff in places, torn in others. Her hair, the color of wheat, hung in icy tangles around her face. Her head lolled forward, chin against her chest. She was not moving. At the base of the post, half covered in snow, lay a wicker basket. Inside, three tiny faces, red with cold and screaming. Silas dismounted before Ranger had fully stopped. He sank to his knees in the snow beside the woman, his hands already reaching for the wire. It had cut deep into her wrists, the barbs buried in swollen flesh, blood frozen in dark ribbons down her arms. He pulled off his gloves and touched her neck. Her skin was ice cold, but beneath his fingers he felt it. A pulse, faint and slow, but there. "Ma'am," he said, his voice was rough from disuse. He had not spoken to another human being in 3 weeks. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered. Her lips moved, cracked and gray. No sound came out at first. Then, barely audible, she whispered, "Don't. Wow, don't take them back to him." Silas did not ask who. He pulled his Bowie knife from his belt and began cutting the wire. It was old and brittle in the cold, but the barbs had sunk deep. Blood welled fresh as he worked, bright red against the white snow. The woman made no sound. When the last strand parted, she slumped forward into his arms. He lowered her gently to the ground and turned to the basket. 3 infants, none older than a few months. The smallest, a tiny girl with a face like a porcelain doll, had stopped crying. Her lips were blue. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, irregular gasps. Silas scooped her up, pressed her against his chest inside his coat. Her body was cold as stone. He rubbed her back, her arms, trying to force warmth into her. Nothing. She was not breathing. For 5 minutes, Silas knelt in the snow, the baby pressed against his heart, his massive hands moving in slow circles across her tiny back. He had learned this from an army medic during the war, a technique for drowning victims. It had never worked then. He did not expect it to work now. But then the baby gasped. Her chest heaved. She let out a thin, reedy wail. Silas closed his eyes and allowed himself one long breath. Then he moved. He placed the smallest baby back in the basket with her sisters and wrapped all 3 in his saddle blanket. He lifted the basket and secured it to Ranger's saddlebags. Then he turned to the woman. She was light, dangerously light, and he lifted her without effort, draping her across the front of the saddle before climbing up behind her. He wrapped his coat around them both, tucking the edges tight against the wind. "Come on, boy," he said to Ranger. "Home." The horse turned and began the long walk back. Behind them, the fence post stood alone in the white waste, blood frozen on its splintered wood, a testament to something dark and cruel that Silas did not yet understand. But he would. Soon enough, he would understand everything. The wind fought them every step. It shrieked around the peaks, tore at Silas's coat, tried to rip the woman from his arms. Snow piled against Ranger's chest, and the horse grunted with effort, his hooves breaking through the crust with each step. The cold was absolute, a physical thing that pressed down like an iron weight. Silas held the woman tight against him. Her head rested on his shoulder, her breath so faint he had to lean close to feel it. Inside the saddlebags, the babies had stopped crying. That worried him more than the screaming had. Silence in cold like this meant the body was shutting down, conserving its last reserves of warmth for the heart and brain. Silence meant time was running out. They had covered maybe half a mile when Silas saw the wolves. 7 of them, gray shadows moving through the trees on the left flank. They loped parallel to the trail, heads low, tongues lolling. Their eyes caught the failing light and reflected it back, green and hungry. Silas shifted the woman to his left arm and drew the Winchester from its scabbard with his right. The rifle was a model 1873, chambered for 44-40 cartridges, a lever-action repeater that could fire 15 rounds as fast as a man could work the lever. Silas had 4 rounds left. He had used the rest hunting rabbit and deer over the past 2 weeks. The wolves drew closer. They had caught the scent of blood. Silas fired once into the air. The crack of the gunshot echoed across the ridge. The wolves scattered, disappearing into the trees. But they did not leave. Silas could still see them, darker shapes against the white, pacing just beyond rifle range. He fired again. This time, one of the wolves yelped and bolted. The others hesitated. 2 rounds left. Ranger plodded on, his breath coming hard now. The horse was tired. They all were. Silas scanned the ridge ahead, looking for landmarks. There, a lightning-struck pine, its top sheared off and blackened. Half a mile more. They could make it. The wolves closed in again. Silas did not fire. He held the rifle ready, finger on the trigger, eyes moving between the pack and the trail. If they charged, he would have time for 2 shots, maybe 3 if he was fast. After that, it would come down to the knife. But the wolves did not charge. They followed, patient and silent, waiting for weakness. Silas reached down and touched the woman's face. Still cold, still alive. He shifted his grip, held her tighter, and urged Ranger forward. The cabin appeared through the swirling snow like a mirage. Low and square, built from pine logs chinked with clay, it sat in a small clearing on the southern slope of the ridge. Smoke should have been rising from the stone chimney, but Silas had let the fire die that morning. No matter, he would have it roaring again in minutes. He guided Ranger to the front door and dismounted, careful not to jostle the woman. The wolves had stopped at the edge of the clearing, watching. Silas ignored them. He kicked the door open, carried the woman inside, and laid her on the single cot near the cold hearth. Then he went back for the babies. The basket was frozen to the saddlebag. He had to work it free with his knife. Inside, the 3 infants huddled together, their tiny bodies pressed close for warmth. The smallest one, the one who had stopped breathing, whimpered softly. Silas felt a wave of relief so strong it nearly buckled his knees. He carried the basket inside and set it near the hearth. Then he went back out, led Ranger to the small lean-to stable behind the cabin, rubbed the horse down quickly with a wool blanket, and gave him a double ration of oats. Ranger deserved it. When Silas finally stepped back inside the cabin and closed the door behind him, shutting out the wind and the wolves and the brutal cold, he stood for a moment in the darkness, breathing hard, his body shaking not from cold, but from the adrenaline finally draining away. 4 lives, he had carried 4 lives through the storm, and now in the silence of his cabin, with the wind howling outside and the darkness pressing close, he had to figure out how to keep them alive. Silas moved with the deliberate efficiency of a man who had lived alone for years. He knelt at the hearth and began building a fire, his hands working automatically. Kindling first, dried twigs and bark shavings he kept in a tin box by the mantel, then larger sticks arranged in a pyramid. He struck flint against steel, once, twice, 3 times. Sparks caught, smoke curled, flame bloomed, small and tentative at first, then growing, crackling, spreading warmth into the cold room. He fed the fire until it roared. Then he turned to the woman. She lay exactly as he had placed her, motionless on the cot. Her wrists were still bleeding, slow seeps from where the barbed wire had cut deepest. Silas went to the corner shelf and took down his medical kit, a wooden box containing needle and thread, clean linen strips, a bottle of whiskey, and a jar of salve made from bear fat and yarrow root. He knelt beside the cot and examined her wrists. The wire had cut through skin and fat down to the tendons in places. If infection set in, she would lose her hands, maybe her life. He poured whiskey over the wounds, soaking the linen strips, then began to clean away the dried blood and dirt. The woman did not stir. When the wounds were as clean as he could make them, Silas threaded a needle with catgut and began to sew. 12 stitches in the left wrist, 14 in the right. He worked slowly, each stitch placed with care. His hands, so large they could palm a man's skull, moved with surprising delicacy. This was not the first time he had sewn flesh. During the war, he had helped the surgeons patch up soldiers when the casualties overwhelmed the medical tents. He had learned that size did not matter. Only steadiness did. When he finished, he wrapped both wrists in clean linen and tied them off. Then he covered the woman with his only blanket, a thick wool quilt his mother had made 30 years ago, before the cholera took her. The babies came next. They had stopped crying again, a bad sign. Silas lifted them one by one from the basket and examined them. 2 girls with dark hair, one with hair so blonde it was almost white. All 3 were painfully thin, their ribs visible beneath translucent skin. The smallest one, the blonde, looked no more than 4 months old. The others might have been a year and a half and 3 years. Silas had no milk, no formula, nothing suitable for infants. But he did have a goat, a temperamental old nanny who lived in a pen behind the cabin and gave just enough milk to keep Silas in butter and cheese. He would have to make do. He went outside, fought his way through the wind to the pen, and milked the goat by lantern light. The animal protested, stamping and bleeding, but Silas was faster. He returned to the cabin with a tin cup half full of warm, frothy milk. From a wooden box under his cot, he retrieved a small, carved spoon. He had made it 6 years ago, whittled it from applewood and sanded it smooth, intending to give it to his niece Anna when she was old enough to eat solid food. But Anna had died of diphtheria at 8 months old, and Silas had kept the spoon, unable to throw it away, unable to look at it without remembering. Now he held it again, and the memories came flooding back. Anna's laugh, high and bright, her tiny fingers wrapped around his thumb. The morning his sister came to tell him Anna was gone, her face gray with grief. Silas shook his head, pushed the memories down. Not now. Now there were 3 babies who needed him. He knelt beside the basket, dipped the spoon in the warm milk, and brought it to the smallest baby's lips. She turned her head away. He tried again, touching the spoon gently to her mouth. This time her lips parted. Her tongue darted out. She tasted the milk, hesitated, then opened her mouth wider. He fed her slowly, spoonful by spoonful, until she turned her head away, satisfied. Then he moved to the next baby and the next. By the time all 3 had been fed, an hour had passed. The fire burned low. Silas added more wood and sat back on his heels, watching the babies sleep. They looked peaceful now, their breathing deep and even. The smallest one had color in her cheeks again. Silas felt something in his chest loosen, a knot he had not realized was there. Behind him, the woman stirred. Silas turned. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. He stood and moved to her, kneeling so his face was leveled with hers. "You're safe," he said quietly. His voice was gentler than he had intended, almost a whisper. "You're in my cabin. No one's going to hurt you." Her eyes found his. They were blue, pale as winter sky, and filled with something that might have been fear, or might have been disbelief. "My babies," she whispered. Her voice was like sandpaper on wood, raw and broken. "Where are my babies?" "Here," Silas said. He gestured to the basket by the fire. "All 3. They're alive. They're safe." She tried to sit up. Pain flashed across her face, and she fell back with a gasp. Silas placed a hand on her shoulder, firm but not rough. "Don't move," he said. "You're hurt. Rest." But she was not listening. She was staring at the basket, her eyes wide, tears spilling down her temples and into her hair. "They'll come for me," she whispered. "They'll say I stole them, that I can't let them take my babies." Silas did not know who they were. He did not know what had brought this woman to that fence post, bound and bleeding in the snow. But he knew this much. Whoever had done it was a monster, and monsters, in his experience, rarely gave up their prey. "No one's taking anyone," Silas said. His voice was low and hard as iron. "On my land, no one takes anyone's child." The woman looked at him. For a long moment she said nothing. Then, so faintly he almost missed it, she said, "Thank you." She closed her eyes. Her breathing slowed. She was asleep. Silas stood and walked to the window. Outside, the storm raged on, burying the world in white. The wolves were gone, but their tracks remained, dark lines in the snow. Somewhere out there, the fence post still stood. Somewhere out there, someone believed this woman and her children were better off dead. Silas did not know the full story yet, but he would learn it, and when he did, he would do what needed to be done. For now, though, he had 4 lives under his roof, 4 lives that depended on him. He would not fail them. He returned to the fire, added more wood, and sat down in the old rocking chair his father had made. From the corner of the room, he retrieved a block of cedar and his carving knife. The wood was smooth and pale, the knife sharp. He had no plan, no design. He just began to cut. The knife moved in slow, deliberate strokes. Curls of cedar fell to the floor. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire crackled and the baby slept. And in the silence between the sounds, Silas Thornwood began to carve 3 names into wood, giving permanence to 3 small lives that someone had tried to erase. Dawn came slowly to the ridge. the sun hidden behind layers of cloud that turned the world a uniform gray. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind drifts as high as a man's chest in a silence so complete it felt unnatural. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned down to coals. Silas woke in the rocking chair, his neck stiff, the carving knife still in his hand. He stood and stretched, joints popping. The woman was still asleep on the cob, her breathing steady. The babies were awake, though, making soft mewling sounds. Silas fed them again, goat's milk warmed over the coals, spoonful by patient spoonful. The smallest one drank even more eagerly than the night before, making small, satisfied sounds between swallows. Her color was better, her grip stronger. She was going to survive this. When they were fed and changed, using strips of soft cloth Silas had meant for cleaning his rifle, he placed them back in the basket lined with sheepskin. Then he turned his attention to the woman. She woke as he approached, her eyes snapping open with a start. She looked around wildly, then saw him and went still. "Easy," Silas said. "It's morning, storm's past." She tried to sit up. This time she managed it, though her face went white with pain. Silas helped her, his hands gentle on her shoulders. When she was upright, he handed her a tin cup of water. She drank it in 3 long swallows. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was stronger now, though still hoarse. "I don't know your name." "Silas Thornwood." "I'm Eliza." She paused. "Eliza Harland." The name meant nothing to Silas. He nodded and waited. People told you things when you gave them silence. He had learned that long ago. Eliza looked at the babies, then back at him. "Their names are Grace, Rose, and Clara. Grace is the youngest, 4 months. Rose is 19 months. Clara just turned 3. "Good names," Silas said. Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "No one has ever said that before." Silas did not know what to say to that, so he said nothing. He went to the shelf and came back with a bowl of oatmeal he had cooked earlier. It was plain, unsweetened, but hot and filling. He handed it to her with another spoon. She ate slowly, her hands shaking. When she finished, she set the bowl aside and looked at him. "You want to know what happened?" she said. It was not a question. Silas pulled the other chair over and sat down. "Only if you want to tell it." Eliza took a breath. "I married Marcus Harlan 7 years ago. I was 17. He was 31, a widower, a banker. Everyone said I was lucky." She laughed, a bitter sound. "Lucky." She told him the rest in short, halting sentences. How Marcus had wanted a son. How each daughter was a disappointment. How his mother, Constance, had called Eliza cursed. How the beating started small but grew worse with each failed pregnancy. She told him about December 10th, 5 days ago. Marcus, drunk and furious. The Baptist preacher summoned to the house. The ritual of correction, 3 hours on her knees while Constance read scripture about barren women and God's judgment. And finally the fence post, the barbed wire, the 3 babies placed in the snow. He said if God wanted me to live, I would live through the night, Eliza whispered. If not, it was his will. Silas felt something cold and hard settle in his chest. He had seen cruelty before for some. He had fought in the war, seen men do terrible things to each other. But this was different. This was calculated. This was a man who believed he was righteous. "Where is he now?" Silas asked. "Black Mesa, 20 miles south. He'll have told everyone I went mad, that I tried to drown the girls in the creek and ran off into the mountains." She looked at Silas, her eyes desperate. "He'll come looking. He has to. If people find out what he did, he'll lose everything." "Let him come," Silas said. Eliza stared at him. "You don't understand. Marcus Harlan owns the bank. He owns half the town. He'll bring men. They'll kill you and take me back." "Maybe," Silas said, "but not without a fight." He stood and walked to the wall where his work hung, the 3 wooden plaques he had carved during the night. Each was smooth and oval, the size of a man's hand, with a name burned into the wood using a hot poker from the fire. Above each name, he had carved a small flower, a rosebud for Grace, a full bloom for Rose, a lily for Clara. He took them down and brought them to Eliza. She looked at them, then up at him, then back at the plaques. Her hands trembled as she reached out to touch them. "You made these?" Her voice broke. "Last night?" Silas nodded. But you don't even know us. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. Why would you do this? Because their names matter, Silas said simply. Because they matter. Eliza pressed the plaques to her chest and wept. Silas left her there and went outside to tend to Ranger and split more firewood. When he came back an hour later, the plaques were hanging above the makeshift crib, and Eliza was asleep again, one hand resting on the basket where her daughter slept. Silas sat by the fire and stared into the flames. He did not know what was coming. But he knew this. He had made a choice the moment he cut that woman free from the fence post. There was no going back now. He had saved her. And in doing so, he had set something in motion that could not be stopped. Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for a moment, casting long shadows across the snow. And far to the south, in the town of Black Mesa, a man named Marcus Harlan was preparing to take back what he believed belonged to him. The storm had passed, but the reckoning was just beginning. 4 days passed in the cabin on the ridge. 4 days of careful routine, of feeding and healing, of wood smoke and whispered conversations. The world beyond the clearing remained buried in snow, silent and white and waiting. Eliza grew stronger. The color returned to her cheeks, and the cuts on her wrists began to close. Though they would leave scars like iron bracelets, permanent reminders of what had been done to her. She moved about the cabin now, slowly at first, then with increasing confidence. She tended the babies, cooked simple meals from Silas's stores, and in the evenings, after the children slept, she sat by the fire and talked. She told Silas about her father, the blacksmith who had died owing Marcus Harlan $800, about the bargain struck over his grave, about the first year of marriage, when Marcus had still been kind, before the obsession with a male heir consumed him. She told him about Constance, the mother-in-law who had turned cruelty into a religious practice, who had made Eliza drink bitter teas and strange tinctures meant to ensure a son, potions that left her sick and weak but changed nothing. Silas listened. He was good at listening. He had learned during his 2 years alone on the ridge that silence was its own kind of language. He chopped wood while she talked, or cleaned his rifle, or sat carving small toys for the children. He did not interrupt. He did not offer empty reassurances. He simply heard her, and that seemed to be enough. On the fourth night, as Eliza nursed Grace by the firelight, she asked him about the handkerchief. She had found it that morning, tucked in a wooden box beneath a loose floorboard where Silas kept his few valuables. A square of fine linen, yellowed with age, embroidered in one corner with delicate blue thread. Adeline. Who was she? Eliza asked quietly. Silas did not look up from the piece of leather he was working, cutting it into the shape of a doll. A long time ago, he said. That's not an answer. He set down his knife and stared into the fire. She was the daughter of the man who owned the Double R Ranch, where I worked as foreman. We were engaged. She left 3 years ago, married a lawyer from Denver. Said she couldn't live out here, couldn't live in the cold and the silence. He paused. She was right to leave. I wasn't what she needed. What did you need? Eliza asked. Silas considered the question. No one had ever asked him that before. I needed someone who understood that silence isn't empty, he said finally. That cold doesn't mean dead, that a life can be small and still be whole. He looked at her. She needed more than I could give. So she left. Do you still love her? No. The answer came without hesitation. But I remember what it felt like to not be enough. I remember what it felt like to be left behind. Eliza nodded slowly. Grace had fallen asleep at her breast. She shifted the baby to her shoulder and patted her back gently. Is that why you saved me? Because you know what it feels like to be abandoned? Maybe, Silas said. Or maybe I saved you because I needed to save someone. Maybe I needed to prove I could be the man Adeline thought I wasn't. You are that man, Eliza said. Her voice was firm. You saved 4 lives. You asked for nothing in return. You are exactly that man. Silas picked up his knife again and returned to his work, but something in his chest felt lighter, as if a weight he had carried for 3 years had finally shifted. Outside, the temperature dropped as night deepened. The stars burned cold and distant, and 20 miles to the south in the town of Black Mesa, 3 men saddled their horses and rode north toward the ridge. Martha Reeves arrived at dawn on the fifth day. She came alone, riding a gray mule through snow that reached the animal's chest. She was 58 years old, lean and weathered as old rope, with steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and eyes that missed nothing. She ran the post office in Black Mesa and had for 30 years. She knew every secret in the territory, heard every rumor, saw every piece of mail that passed through town. And she had known Silas Thornwood since he was a boy. Silas heard the mule before he saw it, the labored breathing and the crunch of hooves breaking through ice. He stepped out into the small porch, rifle in hand, and watched Martha emerge from the tree line. She raised one hand in greeting, and he lowered the rifle. "Martha," he said as she dismounted, "long way to come in weather like this." "Had to," she said, her breath steaming. "You got company in there?" Silas hesitated, then nodded. "Woman and 3 children. Found them 4 days ago, left to die in the storm." Martha's face hardened. "Eliza Harland." It was not a question. Silas felt his jaw tighten. "You know her?" "Know of her, know her husband better." Martha tied the mule to the porch rail and stamped snow from her boots. "That's why I'm here, Silas. There's trouble coming, and you need to know about it." Inside, Eliza sat by the fire with Rose on her lap. She looked up as Martha entered, fear flashing across her face. But Martha just nodded to her, calm and businesslike, and turned to Silas. "Marcus Harlan posted a reward 2 days ago," she said without preamble. $500 for the return of his wife, dead or alive." The words hung in the air like smoke. Eliza's face went white. Silas felt something cold crawl up his spine. "He's telling everyone she went mad," Martha continued. "Says she tried to drown the children in Crow Creek, then ran off into the mountains. Says she's dangerous, needs to be brought back for treatment. He's got papers from Judge Mortimer declaring her mentally incompetent, giving him full custody of the girls." "That's a lie," Eliza whispered. "Course it is," Martha said. "But it's a lie with legal weight. And Marcus hired 3 men to find you. They left town this morning." She looked at Silas. "They're coming here." "Who?" Silas asked. Martha ticked them off on her fingers. "Virgil Kane. You heard of him?" Silas had. Everyone had. Virgil Kane was a gunfighter, a man who had killed 12 people in 8 years and never once been charged with murder. He was fast, cold, and expensive. If Marcus Harlan had hired him, he was serious. "Dutch Carver," Martha continued, "half Kiowa, best tracker in 3 territories. If there's a trail to follow, he'll find it. And Rafe Cooley, Kane's apprentice, young, stupid, likes to use a knife." Silas absorbed this information in silence. 3 men, professional killers, against 1 cowboy in a cabin with a woman and 3 infants. "How long do I have?" he asked. "They left at first light," Martha said. "Figure they'll be here by mid-afternoon if the weather holds. Maybe sooner if Dutch picks up your trail from town." Eliza stood, still holding Rose. "I should go back," she said, her voice shaking. "I'll tell them it was a mistake, that I was confused. I'll go back, and this will end." "No," Silas said. The word came out harder than he intended. He softened his tone. "You go back, you die. Maybe not today, but soon. And your daughters will grow up with a man who left you to freeze because you couldn't give him a son." "But you'll die if I stay," Eliza said. Tears streamed down her face. "I can't let that happen. You saved us. I won't let you die for us." "I won't die," Silas said, "and neither will you." He turned to Martha. "You know Sheriff Wade?" "Dalton Wade. Known him 20 years. He's a good man. Fair. Think you could ride back to town and bring him here? Tell him what's really happening?" Martha considered this. "I could try, but it'll take time, 5-6 hours at least, and that's if I can find him quick. These 3 will be here long before." "I know," Silas said, "but when it's over, I want the law here. I want witnesses." Martha studied his face for a long moment. Then she nodded. "All right, I'll go. But Silas, you listen to me. Virgil Kane is not a man you fight fair. He'll kill you and not lose a minute's sleep. You understand?" "I understand." Martha looked like she wanted to say more, but she just shook her head and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "Your father would be proud of you, boy. You know that?" "Maybe," Silas said. "Or maybe he'd call me a fool." Those aren't mutually exclusive, Martha said. And then she was gone, the mule's hoofbeats fading into the white silence. Silas stood at the door for a moment, watching her go. Then he closed it, dropped the heavy wooden bar into place, and turned to face Eliza. We need to prepare, he said. Silas moved through the cabin with purpose, his mind racing through possibilities, contingencies, worst-case scenarios. He had fought in the war, seen combat at Antietam and Gettysburg, learned what men could do to each other when violence was unleashed. He knew that preparation was everything, that the difference between living and dying often came down to seconds, to inches, to having thought through what might happen before it happened. First, he reinforced the door. The cabin's entrance was its weakest point, oak planks held together with iron straps, strong but not impenetrable. He took two thick beams of pine from his winter woodpile and braced them across the door at angles, wedging the ends into notches he carved into the floor in the opposite wall. It would not stop a determined assault, but it would slow one down. Next, the windows. There were three, all small, all shuttered. He closed and barred each one, then stacked firewood against them from the inside, creating makeshift barriers that would stop a bullet, or at least slow it down. The cabin grew darker with each window closed, until the only light came from the fire and one narrow gap in the eastern shutter where Silas left himself a line of sight. He checked his weapons. The Winchester Model 1873 held 15 rounds, and he had 20 cartridges in his ammunition box, 35 rounds total. His Colt revolver had 6 shots, and he had another 12 bullets for it, 47 rounds. If it came to sustained gunfire, he would run out fast. But Silas did not plan on sustained gunfire. He planned on not firing at all if he could help it. The knife came next. The Bowie, 12 inches of steel with a clip point and a brass guard, sharp enough to shave with. He strapped it to his belt and made sure it drew smooth from the sheath. Then he turned his attention to the false floor. At the back of the cabin, beneath a stack of fur pelts, was a trapdoor. Silas had built it 2 years ago, not for hiding but for storage. A root cellar dug 4 feet deep and lined with stone to keep food from freezing. It was 6 feet by 8 feet, barely large enough for a grown man to stand upright, but it would hold a woman and 3 children if it had to. He cleared the pelts away and opened the trap door. The space below was dark and cold, smelling of earth and old potatoes. He climbed down and began preparing it, carrying down blankets, a jug of water, a canvas bag filled with dried meat and hardtack. He set a candle on a shelf carved into the wall, along with matches wrapped in oilcloth to keep them dry. When he climbed back up, Eliza was standing at the edge of the opening, looking down. "If they come," Silas said, "you take the children and go down there. You stay quiet no matter what you hear. You understand?" "I understand," Eliza said, but her voice shook. "Silas, what are you going to do?" "Talk," he said. "That's all. Just talk." "And if talking doesn't work?" Silas looked at her. In the dim firelight, her face was pale but determined. She had been through hell, had been left to die, had every reason to collapse into fear and despair. But she was still standing, still fighting. "If talking doesn't work," Silas said quietly, "then I'll do what needs to be done. But it won't come to that. Trust me." Eliza nodded. She did not look convinced, but she did not argue. Instead, she helped him finish preparing the cellar, then gathered the children and their few belongings, ready to move quickly if the moment came. By noon, the cabin was as ready as Silas could make it. He sat by the fire, cleaning the Winchester one more time, running an oiled cloth along the barrel, checking the action. His hands moved automatically, muscle memory from 1,000 cleanings before. But his mind was elsewhere, running through scenarios, planning responses. He did not want to kill anyone. He had killed during the war, young men in gray uniforms, boys really, who had died screaming in the mud while Silas stood over them with a smoking rifle. He still saw their faces sometimes in dreams or in quiet moments when his mind wandered. He did not want to add more faces to that collection, but he would if he had to. He would do whatever it took to protect the woman and children under his roof. Outside, the sun reached its zenith and began its slow descent. Shadows lengthened across the snow, and from the south, carried on the cold wind, came the faint sound of hoofbeats. They were coming. Silas saw them from the eastern window gap, three dark shapes moving through the trees half a mile out. They rode in single file, the lead horse breaking trail through the deep snow. Even from a distance, Silas could tell which was which. Dutch Carver rode point, leaning forward in the saddle, eyes on the ground, reading sign. He was small and wiry, dressed in buckskins and fur, a rifle across his back. Behind him came Virgil Kane, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed all in black, a long coat that hung to his knees and a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. His horse was black too, a big stallion that moved with arrogant ease. At the rear came Rafe Cooley, younger than the others, fidgeting in the saddle, one hand resting on the hilt of a large knife at his belt. And behind them, on a white horse that stood out against the snow like a beacon, rode Marcus Harland himself. Silas felt his jaw tighten. He had expected the three hunters, but not Harlan. The man had come to watch, to see his wife brought back, or to see her die. Silas turned from the window. "They're here," he said to Eliza. "4 of them. Time to go down." Eliza gathered the children quickly, her movements efficient despite the fear in her eyes. Clara, the oldest, sensed something was wrong and began to whimper. Eliza shushed her gently, pressing a finger to her lips. "We're going to play a game," she whispered. "A quiet game. Can you be very, very quiet?" Clara nodded, her eyes wide. Eliza climbed down into the cellar with Grace in her arms. Silas handed down Rose, then Clara. The little girl clung to his hand for a moment, and Silas felt something twist in his chest. He squeezed her fingers gently, then let go. "Remember," he said to Eliza, "no matter what you hear, stay quiet, stay down." "Silas?" Eliza said. She looked up at him from the darkness below, her face pale and frightened and brave. "Don't die for us, please." "I don't plan to," Silas said. He lowered the trap door and covered it with the pelts, then pushed a heavy trunk over the spot for good measure. From the outside, there was no indication anyone had been there. He returned to the window. The riders had reached the edge of the clearing. They stopped there, just inside the tree line, and sat their horses, watching the cabin. Silas could see them clearly now. Dutch Carver's scarred face, expressionless as stone. Virgil Kane's cold eyes, gray as January ice. Rafe Cooley's nervous grin. And Marcus Harlan, well-dressed and clean-shaven, sitting his white horse like a judge, come to pronounce sentence. For a long moment, no one moved. The clearing was silent except for the creak of leather and the breathing of horses. Then Silas opened the door and stepped outside. He did not bring the rifle. He left it leaning against the wall inside. He carried nothing but himself, 6 feet 3 inches of quiet strength, hands empty, face calm. He walked to the center of the clearing and stopped. The snow came to mid-shin. The cold bit through his clothes. He stood there, waiting, and the 4 riders came forward. They stopped 10 paces away. Up close, they were even more intimidating. Virgil Kane had the eyes of a man who had killed so many times it no longer registered as sin. Dutch Carver radiated coiled violence, ready to spring. Rafe Cooley's grin had an edge of madness. And Marcus Harlan, for all his fine clothes and groomed appearance, had the eyes of a fanatic. "Mr. Badrim Sudu." "Thornwood," Marcus said. His voice was cultured, pleasant, as if they were meeting at a church social. "I believe you have something that belongs to me." Silas said nothing. "My wife," Marcus continued, "Eliza Harland, and my 3 daughters. I'm told you found them in the mountains. I've come to take them home." Still, Silas remained silent. Marcus's pleasant expression flickered. "I have legal documents, Mr. Thornwood. A judge's order declaring my wife mentally incompetent and granting me full custody of my children. She is not well. She tried to harm them. I'm sure you can understand a husband's concern." "I understand," Silas said quietly, "that you tied your wife to a fence post with barbed wire and left her to die in a blizzard. I understand that you put 3 babies in the snow and walked away. I understand that you're a coward and a liar, Mr. Harland." The clearing went very still. Marcus's face flushed red. Behind him, Virgil Kane's hand moved almost imperceptibly toward his gun. "You don't know what you're talking about," Marcus said, his voice tight. "You're interfering in a family matter. Stand aside." "No," Silas said. "I'm warning you," Marcus said. "These men with me are authorized to use force if necessary. Stand aside or suffer the consequences." "No," Silas said again. Virgil Kane urged his horse forward. "Old man," he said, his voice flat and emotionless. "You know who I am?" "I know," Silas said. "Then you know you can't win this. You're one man with an old rifle against three of us. Best thing you can do is step aside. Maybe live to see tomorrow." "Maybe," Silas agreed. "Or maybe not. But either way, I'm not moving." Kane stared at him. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then Rafe Cooley laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. "Hell with this," Cooley said. He dismounted and started towards Silas, one hand on his knife. "Let's just take him." Rafe Cooley moved fast, but not as fast as he thought. He covered the distance in 3 long strides, drawing the knife as he came, a wicked 12-inch blade that caught the afternoon light. He swung it in a wide arc, aiming for Silas's face. Silas could have dodged, could have stepped back, drawn his own knife, met violence with violence. He was trained for it, had the reflexes, the skill. But he did not move. The blade never reached him. Cooley changed his grip at the last second, reversed the knife, and brought the heavy brass pommel down in a brutal arc that caught Silas on the left shoulder. The impact was tremendous. Silas felt the joint separate with a wet pop, ligaments tearing, the humerus sliding out of the socket. White-hot pain exploded through his arm and chest. He staggered but did not fall. Cooley hit him again, this time in the ribs. Silas heard the crack, felt 2 ribs give way. His breath left in a rush. He dropped to one knee in the snow. "Get up," Cooley said, grinning. "Come on, old man, fight back." Silas stayed down. Blood filled his mouth where he had bitten his tongue. His left arm hung useless at his side. Every breath sent knives through his chest, but he did not fight back. Dutch Carver dismounted and joined in. He was smaller than Cooley but faster, his fists like hammers. He hit Silas in the stomach, doubling him over, then brought his knee up into Silas's face. Silas's nose broke with a crunch. Blood poured down his chin, hot and copper-tasting. "Stop this," Marcus Harlan said from his horse. But his voice was uncertain, almost fascinated. He was not ordering them to stop. He was watching. Cooley grabbed Silas by the hair and yanked his head back. "Where is she?" he hissed. "Where's the woman?" Silas said nothing. Cooley punched him in the throat. Silas gagged, fought for air, fell forward onto his hands and knees. They kicked him then, both of them, boots driving into his ribs, his back, his legs. Silas curled into a ball, protecting his head and vitals as best he could. The pain was overwhelming, a red wall that threatened to pull him under. But through it all, one thought remained clear. Do not fight back. Do not give them an excuse to draw their guns. Do not give them a reason to search the cabin. Finally, Virgil Kane spoke. Marcus Harlan sat frozen on his white horse, watching. His hands gripped the reins so tight his knuckles turned white. He had imagined this moment differently. In his mind, Eliza would see him coming, would run to him begging forgiveness. The children would cry for their father. Order would be restored. But this man in the snow, bleeding and broken, who refused to fight back even when death was certain. This was not the defiant criminal Marcus had expected. This was something else, something that made Marcus's stomach turn. "Enough," Marcus said. His voice came out weak, barely audible. No one heard him. Or if they did, they ignored him. He had hired these men. He had set this in motion. And now he could not stop it. "That's enough." Cooley and Carver stepped back, breathing hard. Silas lay in the snow, blood spreading around him in a dark stain. His vision swam, his body screamed. But he was conscious. Barely. Kane dismounted slowly, his boots crunching in the snow. He walked to where Silas lay and looked down at him. Then he drew his Colt Python, a massive revolver with a 6-inch barrel, and pointed it at Silas's head. "Wait," Marcus said, louder now. He dismounted, his legs unsteady. "Virgil, wait, don't kill him." Kane did not lower the gun. "You hired me to bring your wife back. He's in the way." "He's unarmed," Marcus said. The words felt strange in his mouth. When had he started caring about that? "He hasn't drawn a weapon. He's hiding them," Kane interrupted. "And I'm going to make him tell me where." "I'll ask once," Kane said quietly. "Where is Eliza Harlan?" Silas looked up at him. Blood dripped from his nose and mouth. His left arm lay at an unnatural angle, but his eyes were clear. "Not here," he managed to say. The words came out as a rasp, barely audible. "You're lying." "Am I?" Silas coughed and blood sprayed across the snow. "You see her? See any sign of her or three babies?" He forced himself to sit up, the pain almost blinding. "I found them in the storm. Helped them. Sent them on their way. They're long gone." It was a lie, and they all knew it, but it was a lie told with such conviction, through such obvious pain, that for a moment even Kane hesitated. Marcus Harlan urged his horse forward. "He's hiding them in the cabin. Search it." "No," Silas said. He tried to stand and almost made it, got one foot under him before his leg gave out and he fell again. "You come in my home, I'll kill you." Cooley laughed. "With what? You can barely stand." "Maybe," Silas said, "but I'll die trying, and one of you will die with me, maybe all of you. You willing to risk that, Mr. Harlan? You willing to die to get your wife back?" Marcus's face went pale. He was a banker, a man of ledgers and respectability. He was not willing to die. Not for this. Not for anything. "Virgil," Marcus said, "search the cabin." Kane nodded. He kept the gun trained on Silas and began walking toward the door. And then from the south came the sound of horses. Many horses. And a voice, loud and carrying, amplified by the cold air and the snow. "Throw down your weapons. You're all under arrest." Sheriff Dalton Wade came over the ridge at a gallop, 4 deputies behind him. They were heavily armed, rifles out, badges gleaming on their coats. Wade himself was 45 years old, gray-haired and granite-faced, a veteran of the war like Silas, a man who had seen too much violence to tolerate it in his jurisdiction. Martha Reeves rode behind them on her mule, her face set in grim satisfaction. The 5 riders swept into the clearing like an avalanche. Wade pulled his horse to a sliding stop between Silas and Virgil Kane, his rifle pointed at Kane's chest. "I said drop it," Wade repeated. Kane's eyes flickered to Marcus, then back to Wade. Slowly he lowered the Colt and let it fall into the snow. "Dalton," Marcus said, forcing his voice to remain calm. "This is a misunderstanding. I'm retrieving my wife. She's ill, and this man is harboring her against her will." "That's so?" Wade dismounted, his rifle still trained on the group. "Then why is Mr. Thornwood beaten half to death in the snow? Why are 3 armed men assaulting an unarmed citizen on his own property?" "He resisted," Marcus said. "Did he now?" Wade walked to where Silas lay and knelt beside him. "Silas, you all right?" "Been better," Silas managed. His vision was starting to gray at the edges. "Where's the woman?" Wade asked quietly. "Safe," Silas said. Wade nodded and stood. He turned to his deputies. "Arrest these 3, he said, gesturing to Kane, Carver, and Cooley. "Assault, battery, attempted murder." "Now wait just a minute," Marcus said, his voice rising. "I have legal documents, a judge's order. That woman is my wife, and those children are mine by law." "We'll sort that out in town," Wade said. "But right now, you and your hired guns are guilty of assault. That I can see with my own eyes." "This is outrageous," Marcus said. But his voice had lost its certainty. He was a man used to control, used to getting his way through money and influence. The law, when enforced by someone who could not be bought, was foreign territory. The deputies moved in, shackling Kane, Carver, and Cooley. Kane went quietly, his face expressionless. Carver spat in the snow but did not resist. Cooley cursed and struggled until a deputy put a rifle barrel against his spine. Wade turned to Marcus. "You're not under arrest, Mr. Harlan. Yet. But you're coming back to town with us. We're going to have a long talk about attempted murder and child endangerment." "I didn't attempt to murder anyone," Marcus said. His face was red now, angry and frightened at once. "No." Wade gestured to the clearing, to the blood in the snow, to Silas's broken body. "Then what do you call this?" Marcus had no answer. Martha climbed off her mule and hurried to Silas's side. She knelt in the snow, her weathered hands gentle on his face. "Fool boy," she muttered. "Told you Kane was dangerous." "You were right," Silas said. He tried to smile and winced. "Can you stand?" "Not sure." "Well, we need to get you inside. Get that shoulder back in place before it swells too bad." She looked up at Wade. "Dalton, I need 2 of your men to help me." 2 deputies came over and carefully lifted Silas to his feet. He swayed, his vision tunneling, but he stayed conscious. They half carried him toward the cabin. At the door, Silas stopped. "Wait," he said. He looked back at this clearing, at the four men being led away. His eyes found Marcus Harlan sitting on his white horse, his fine clothes spattered with Silas's blood. Their gazes locked. "She's not going back," Silas said. His voice was weak, but it carried across the snow. "You hear me, Harlan? Never. You'll have to kill me first. And even then, she won't go back." Marcus said nothing, but something in his face crumbled, and for a moment he looked like what he was, a small, cruel man who had lost everything. Then the deputies led the prisoners away, and the clearing fell silent. Inside the cabin, Martha and the two deputies laid Silas on the cot. He was barely conscious now, his body starting to shut down from shock and pain. Martha sent one deputy for snow to pack around the swelling, the other to start the fire. Then she went to the back of the cabin and moved the trunk aside. She lifted the trap door. "Eliza," she called down. "It's Martha Reeves. You can come up now." "They're gone." For a moment, nothing happened. Then Eliza's face appeared in the opening, pale and frightened. "Silas?" "Alive," Martha said. "Hurt bad, but alive. Come on up. We need your help." Eliza climbed out, still holding Grace. The other two girls followed, Clara clinging to her mother's skirt. Eliza's eyes went to Silas on the cot, to the blood, the unnatural angle of his arm, and she gasped. "Oh, God," she whispered. "No time for that," Martha said briskly. "His shoulder's out. We need to put it back. You strong enough to help?" Eliza nodded. She handed Grace to one of the deputies and knelt beside the cot. Martha positioned herself at Silas's head, Eliza at his side. "This is going to hurt him something awful," Martha said. "But it's got to be done now, before the swelling gets worse. You ready?" "Yes," Eliza said. Martha gave Silas a piece of leather to bite down on. He clamped his teeth around it, his eyes meeting Eliza's. She placed her hands on his shoulder, feeling the wrongness of it, the bone where it should not be. "On three," Martha said. "1, 2. She pulled on 3, not waiting, her hands sure and strong. Eliza pushed, following Martha's directions. Silas's body went rigid, every muscle locked in agony. The leather muffled his scream. There was a grinding sensation, a horrible popping sound, and then the joint slid back into place. Silas went limp, unconscious. Eliza sat back, her hands shaking. Martha felt the shoulder, nodded in satisfaction. "Good," she said. "Now we bind it so he doesn't move it." She looked at Eliza. "You done this before?" "No," Eliza said, "but I can learn." For the next hour, Martha taught Eliza how to bind a shoulder, how to wrap broken ribs, how to clean and dress wounds. Eliza's hands were steady as she worked, her fear transformed into focus. When they finished, Silas lay wrapped in linen, his breathing shallow but steady. "He'll live," Martha said. "Tough as an old boot, that one. But he'll be laid up for weeks." Eliza looked at Silas's battered face, then at Martha. "Why did he do that?" she asked quietly. "Why didn't he fight back? He could have killed them." "Because he's smarter than he looks," Martha said. "He fought. They'd have an excuse to kill him, to search this cabin, to find you." She stood and brushed off her skirts. "He took that beating to protect you and your girls. Don't you forget that." Outside, Sheriff Wade appeared in the doorway. "Mrs. Harlan, I need to speak with you." Eliza stood, wiping her hands on her dress. "Of course, boyo." Wade stepped inside and removed his hat. He was a big man, almost as tall as Silas, with kind eyes and a serious face. "Ma'am, I need you to tell me what happened. All of it, from the beginning." So Eliza told him. She told him everything she had told Silas, but with Wade asking questions, drawing out details. Where the fence post was, what time they left her, who was there, what was said, and finally the hardest part, why. "He wanted a son," Eliza said, her voice barely above a whisper. 3 daughters wasn't enough. His mother said I was cursed, that I'd ruined the Harlan name. Marcus said if God wanted me to live, I'd survive the night. If not, it was his judgment. Wade's face was stone. "And the children? He left them too? In the snow, in a basket. He said if they were meant to live, someone would find them. If not," she trailed off. "Mrs. Harlan," Wade said carefully, "your husband has papers from Judge Mortimer declaring you mentally incompetent, giving him custody. That's going to make this complicated. I'm not mad, Eliza said. Her voice was stronger now. I was never mad. I was just unlucky enough to marry a man who saw me as property. I believe you, Wade said. But belief isn't enough. I need evidence. I need proof. You have proof, Martha said. She had been standing by the fire listening. The fence post is still out there. Wire's still got blood on it, and I bet if you check with Doc Harrison in town, you'll find Marcus never called for him. Never reported his wife missing until after she'd been gone 3 days. That's not the behavior of a worried husband. Wade nodded slowly. That's good. What else? Wade nodded slowly. That's good. But a defense lawyer will say the fence post proves nothing, that you could have tied yourself there in madness, that the blood could be from any injury. He looked at Eliza, his face sympathetic but firm. I believe you, Mrs. Harlan, but I need something more, something a jury can't dismiss. Eliza's face fell. After everything, after surviving, after Silas taking that beating, it still might not be enough. I can testify, she said, desperation creeping into her voice. I'll tell them everything. How he beat me, how Constance made me drink those tinctures, how they tied me to that post. And Marcus's lawyer will say, you were hysterical, Wade interrupted gently, that you're an unstable woman who abandoned her children in the wilderness. Your word against his, and he's a respected banker. Then what? Eliza's voice broke. What do I do? How do I prove? He hurt Mama. The voice was so small that at first no one was sure they had heard it. Then it came again, clearer. He hurt Mama, lots of times. Everyone turned. Clara stood in the corner of the cabin, half hidden behind the woodpile. Her face was solemn, her 3-year-old eyes too old, too knowing. She took a step forward. Sweetheart, go back to sleep, Eliza said quickly, moving toward her daughter. This isn't… No. Clara's voice was firm. She walked past her mother straight to Sheriff Wade and looked up at him. Papa hurt Mama. I saw. The cabin went silent. Even the fire seemed to hold its breath. Wade knelt down slowly, his face level with Clara's. When he spoke, his voice was infinitely gentle. Can you tell me what you saw, Clara? Clara nodded, her small hands twisted together, but her voice did not waver. Papa hit Mama when she cried. He said we were bad. He said we made God angry because we weren't boys. How many times did you see him hurt your mama? Wade asked. Lots, Clara said. But the worst was the cold night. Grandma was there, and the man in black clothes. The preacher? Wade asked. Yes, Grandma said Mama was cursed, said we were cursed too. Clara's voice got smaller. Papa said if God loved us, we'd live through the night. If God didn't love us, we'd go to sleep in the snow. Martha pressed a hand to her mouth. One of the deputies turned away, clearing his throat. Eliza sank to her knees, tears streaming down her face. But Clara kept talking, her words falling like stones into still water. Papa tied Mama to the fence. The wire hurt her. She was crying. He put us in the basket outside. It was so cold. My fingers hurt. Rose was crying. Grace wasn't moving. Wade had to clear his throat before he could speak. And then what happened? Clara turned and pointed at Silas, unconscious on the cot. Then the big man came. He cut Mama free. He carried us home. He gave us warm milk. He gave us names. She looked back at Wade, and her eyes were full of something that broke everyone in that room. Papa never said our names, Clara whispered. Not once, but the big man carved them in wood. He made them real. He made us real. That was the moment. That was the climax. Not Eliza's testimony, which could be dismissed as trauma or hysteria. Not Martha's evidence, which could be explained away. But a 3-year-old child, too young to lie convincingly, too innocent to fabricate such specific horror, confirming every detail with the simple, devastating honesty that only children possess. Sheriff Wade stood slowly. His hands were shaking. When he spoke, his voice was rough. That's enough. More than enough. He looked at Eliza, then at Martha, then at Silas's battered form on the cot. Marcus Harland is going to prison for attempted murder. And if I have anything to say about it, he'll hang. Then Wade stood. He looked at Eliza, then at Martha, then at the unconscious form of Silas on the cot. "All right," he said, "that's enough for me. Marcus Harlan is going to jail for attempted murder, and those custody papers from Judge Mortimer are going to disappear into a very deep file somewhere." "Can you do that?" Eliza asked. "I'm the law in this county," Wade said, "and right now the law says no man gets to leave his wife and children to die and call it God's will." He put his hat back on and turned to leave. At the door he paused. "Mrs. Harlan, you're free. You and your girls. You're free." Eliza closed her eyes. For the first time in 7 years, the weight lifted from her shoulders. She drew in a breath that did not hurt, that did not carry fear with it. She was free, but when she opened her eyes, they went to Silas, lying broken and unconscious on the cot. Free, yes, but at what cost? For 2 days, Silas burned with fever. His body fought the trauma, the broken ribs grinding with every shallow breath, the shoulder joint swollen and hot despite the ice Martha packed around it. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in dreams that made him call out names Eliza did not recognize. Anna, Samuel, Adeline. Eliza barely left his side. She wiped his forehead with cool cloths, dribbled water between his lips when he could swallow, changed the dressings on his wounds when they seeped through. Martha stayed the first night, teaching her what to watch for, the signs that infection was taking hold or that internal bleeding had started. Then Martha rode back to town, promising to return in a week with supplies and news. The cabin settled into a new routine. The children played quietly near the fire, sensing the gravity of what was happening, even if they could not understand it. Clara, the oldest, helped her mother, fetching water from the snow melted in a pot, keeping her sisters entertained with games and songs. Rose and Grace were too young to know anything was wrong, but they felt their mother's tension and grew fussy, needing constant attention. On the third morning, Silas's fever broke. Eliza woke to find him watching her from the cot, his eyes clear for the first time since the beating. She sat up quickly, nearly spilling the cup of water she had fallen asleep holding. "You're awake," she said. "How long?" His voice was a croak, barely audible. "3 days." She brought water to his lips. He drank greedily, then coughed, wincing at the pain in his ribs. "The children?" "Safe, all of them." She set the cup aside. "Marcus is in jail. Sheriff Wade arrested him and those 3 men. You saved us, Silas. You saved all of us." Silas closed his eyes. It didn't feel like saving anyone. Felt like getting my ass kicked. Despite everything, Eliza laughed. It was a small sound, surprise out of her, but it filled the cabin with something that had been missing. Lightness. Hope. "Don't make me laugh," Silas muttered, but there was the ghost of a smile on his swollen lips. "Hurts too much." Over the next week, Silas healed slowly. His shoulder remained bound, immobilized against his chest. The ribs would take longer, 6 weeks at least before he could work properly again. The bruises faded from purple to yellow-green, spreading across his torso like storm clouds breaking up. But he was alive, and he was strong, and inch by inch, he fought his way back. And Eliza changed. It started small. The first morning, Silas was too weak to get to the chamber pot. Eliza helped him without hesitation, without embarrassment, with the same matter-of-fact efficiency she used caring for her daughters. When he tried to thank her, she waved him off. "You took a beating for me," she said. "I can help you piss." Then came the wood. The supply inside was running low, and the temperature had dropped again. Eliza bundled up in Silas's spare coat, took his hatchet, and went outside. The first few swings were clumsy, the hatchet bouncing off the frozen wood. But she kept at it, her hands blistering, her arms aching, until she had split enough logs to last 2 days. She came back inside, her face flushed with cold and effort, her hand bleeding through the gloves. Silas looked at her from the kitchen, something like pride in his eyes. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "Yes, I did," Eliza replied. She held up her hands, examining the blisters. "I've spent 7 years waiting for someone else to take care of me. I'm done waiting." She learned to hunt. Silas talked her through, checking the rabbit snares he had set before the fight, showed her where to look for the small signs that game had passed through. She caught her first rabbit on the 5th day, a fat cottontail that squealed when she pulled it from the snare. She cried as she killed it, the neck snap quick and merciful, but she did not hesitate. That night, they ate rabbit stew, and it tasted like victory. She learned to care for Ranger, the big black stallion who had carried them through the storm. The horse was wary of her at first, but she was patient, bringing him treats, speaking to him in soft tones, brushing his coat until it gleamed. After a week, he nickered when she approached, and she felt absurdly pleased. But the most important thing she learned was this: she was strong. Stronger than she had ever believed. Stronger than Marcus had told her she was. Stronger than 7 years of abuse and control had tried to break. One night, after the children were asleep and Silas was dozing on the cot, Eliza stood by the fire and looked at her hands. They were rough now, calloused and scarred. The hands of a woman who worked. The hands of a survivor. She liked them. On the 10th night, Silas woke screaming. Eliza bolted upright from where she had been sleeping on the floor near the fire. Silas thrashed on the cot, his good arm reaching out, his voice raw with terror. "No, Anna, no, come back!" Eliza rushed to his side, placed her hands on his chest, tried to calm him. "Silas, wake up, you're dreaming." "Wake up." His eyes snapped open, wild and unseeing. For a moment, he did not recognize her. Then reality flooded back, and he collapsed against the thin pillow, breathing hard. "Sorry," he gasped. "I'm sorry." "Don't be." Eliza sat on the edge of the cot. "Who's Anna?" Silas closed his eyes. For a long moment, she thought he would not answer. Then he spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "My niece. My sister's daughter. She died 6 years ago. Diphtheria. She was 8 months old." "I'm sorry," Eliza said. "I made her a spoon," Silas continued, as if he had not heard her. "Carved it from applewood, sanded it smooth so it wouldn't hurt her mouth. I was going to give it to her when she was old enough to eat solid food. But she died before that happened." "The spoon you used to feed my daughters," Eliza said quietly. "Yeah." Silas opened his eyes. "I couldn't throw it away. Couldn't use it. But when I saw your girls, saw how hungry they were, it seemed right, like Anna would have wanted it." Eliza took his hand, the good one, and held it. "Tell me about her." So Silas did. He talked about his sister, Margaret, who had married a farmer from Wyoming and moved away. About how excited she had been when Anna was born, how she had written letters full of joy and plans. About the telegram that came 6 months later. "Come quick, baby sick." And the second telegram, 2 days after Silas had ridden 300 miles without stopping, "She's gone." "I held her at the funeral," Silas said. "She was so small, so light, like holding nothing at all. And I kept thinking, what's the point? What's the point of love if it just ends like this?" "Did you find an answer?" Eliza asked. "No," Silas admitted, "but I found something else. I found that even when it hurts, even when it ends, you still have to try. You still have to care. Because the alternative is being dead inside while you're still breathing." Eliza squeezed his hand. "Is that why you saved me? Because you were tired of being dead inside?" Silas looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time since the beating, she saw vulnerability in his eyes. "Maybe," he said. "Or maybe I saved you because I hoped someone would save me too." "From what?" "From myself. From giving up. From believing that a life alone is the only safe life." He paused. "Adeline told me I was too closed off, that I kept everything locked inside. She was right. After Anna died, after the war, I just shut down. Stopped feeling. Stopped trying." "And now?" Eliza asked. "Now I'm terrified," Silas admitted, "because I feel everything. I feel every time Clara laughs, every time Rose takes a step, every time Grace looks at me like I matter. And I feel what happens to you, Eliza. When you're scared or hurt or happy, I feel all of it, and it scares the hell out of me." Eliza leaned forward and kissed his forehead, a soft, tender gesture that made Silas's breath catch. "Good," she said, "because I'm terrified too. But at least we're terrified together." She sat with him until he fell asleep again, this time without dreams. And when she finally lay back down by the fire, she felt something she had not felt in years, the possibility of a future. By the end of the second week, Silas could sit up without help and walk a few steps before exhaustion forced him back to the cot. His shoulder was healing well, The swelling down, though the joint would never be quite the same. The ribs would take longer, but the pain was manageable now, a dull ache rather than the stabbing agony of the first days. Martha returned on the 14th day, riding through fresh snow with a pack mule loaded with supplies. She brought news from town. Marcus Harlan remained in jail, held without bail on charges of attempted murder and child endangerment. Virgil Kane and his two companions had been transferred to Denver to await trial. Judge Mortimer's order declaring Eliza incompetent had been quietly rescinded after Sheriff Wade had a long conversation with the judge about the consequences of signing false documents. "You're a free woman," Martha told Eliza as they unpacked the supplies. "Free and clear. Marcus can't touch you or the girls anymore." Eliza should have felt relief. She should have felt joy, but instead she felt something close to panic. "What do I do now?" she asked. "I have no money, no home, no family. How am I supposed to raise 3 children alone?" "You won't be alone," Martha said. She glanced at Silas, who was dozing on the cot. "Unless you want to be." That night, after the children were asleep and the cabin was quiet, Silas asked the question that had been building between them for days. "What are you going to do?" he said, "now that you're free?" Eliza sat by the fire, mending a tear in Clara's dress. She set the needle down and looked at him. "I don't know," she admitted. "I could go back to Black Mesa, I suppose. Fine work, but everyone there knows me as Marcus's wife, as the woman who went mad. I'm not sure I could ever be anything else to them." "You could go somewhere new," Silas suggested. "Denver, maybe, or California. Start over where no one knows you." "I could," Eliza agreed. So she picked up the needle again, then set it down. "Or I could stay here." The words hung in the air. Silas went very still. "Why would you stay?" he asked quietly. Eliza turned to face him fully. "Because in Black Mesa, I was Mrs. Marcus Harland, a decoration, a failed vessel for producing sons. In Denver or California, I'd be a widow with 3 children and no prospects." She paused. "But here in this cabin with you, I'm just Eliza. And for the first time in 7 years, I'm not afraid." Silas sat up slowly, wincing at the pull in his ribs. "Eliza, you don't owe me anything. I didn't save you expecting something in return." "I know that," Eliza said. "That's why I want to stay. Not because I owe you, but because I choose you. Eliza, not the broken woman you found in the snow, not the grateful victim, just me choosing you because when I'm with you, I see who I could be." "And who's that?" Silas asked. "Strong," Eliza said simply. "Real, whole." Silas reached out with his good hand. Eliza took it and moved to sit beside him on the cot. They were close enough now that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the wood smoke and leather that clung to his skin. "I'm not a good bet," Silas said. "I'm 32 years old and I have 40 head of cattle and a cabin that leaks when it rains. I can't give you silk dresses or fine china. I can't even promise you easy winters." "I don't want silk dresses," Eliza said. "I've had silk dresses. They don't keep you warm when you are dying inside." She lifted his hand and placed it against her cheek. "I want this. I want someone who sees me, who carved my daughter's names in wood, who took a beating rather than let them find us. I want you, Silas." "I want you too," Silas whispered. "God help me, I want you too." She leaned in and kissed him. It was gentle, careful of his injuries, but it held all the promise of what they could become. When she pulled back, both of them were breathing hard. "So I'm staying," Eliza said. "If you'll have me." "I'll have you," Silas said, "as long as you want to stay." "Forever then," Eliza said. And in that moment, she meant it. 3 weeks after the beating, Silas was strong enough to ride. Not far and not fast, but enough. He told Eliza he was going to check the cattle to make sure they had survived the winter storms. She believed him, helped him saddle Ranger, and watched him ride off down the mountain with instructions to come back before dark. He did not go to check the cattle. He rode to Black Mesa. The town was small, a collection of wooden buildings huddled around a single main street. The biggest structure was Harlan Trust Bank, but its doors were closed now, windows dark. Marcus's arrest had left the institution in limbo, assets frozen, depositors nervous. Silas did not care about any of that. He rode past the bank to the general store at the end of the street. Inside, the store smelled of coffee and sawdust. The proprietor, a man named Wilson, looked up from behind the counter and did a double take. Silas Thornwood, Wilson said, heard you got yourself in some trouble. Heard right, Silas said. He moved slowly, his ribs still tender. I need to buy some things. What kind of things? Silas told him. Wilson's eyebrows rose, but he nodded and began gathering items. A length of blue cotton fabric, the color of a clear winter sky, smaller pieces of yellow and pink and white cotton for children's dresses, thread, needles, buttons, and from a locked case behind the counter, a small silver ring, plain and unadorned except for a tiny engraved rose on the band. That ring's been sitting here 2 years, Wilson said as he wrapped the purchases. Made by a silversmith passing through. Never thought that anyone would buy it. How much for everything? Silas asked. Wilson tallied it up. $23. It was more than Silas had planned to spend, nearly a month's worth of supplies. But he paid without hesitation, counting out coins from the leather pouch on his belt. Wilson took the money and handed over the wrapped packages. She's a lucky woman, Wilson said, whoever she is. I'm the lucky one, Silas replied. He rode back to the cabin as the sun was setting, the packages secured in his saddlebags. Eliza met him at the door, worry etched on her face. You were gone so long, she said. I was afraid something happened. Nothing happened, Silas said. He dismounted carefully, took the packages from the saddlebags, and carried them inside. The children were already asleep in their corner, curled together like puppies. Eliza had turned the cabin into a home in the week since the fight, hanging curtains made from old sheets, arranging Silas's few possessions into something resembling order. Silas set the packages on the table and turned to face her. His heart was pounding harder than it had during the beating, harder than it had during any battle in the war. This was different. This was choosing something rather than surviving something. This was hope. I went to town, he said. I bought you something. Eliza looked at the packages, then at him. Silas, you didn't need to do that. Yes, I did. He picked up the largest package and handed it to her. Open it. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing the blue fabric. Her eyes widened. It's beautiful. For you, Silas said. For a dress, and the other pieces are for the girls. I thought maybe if you're staying, you should have something that's yours, not something borrowed or old, something new. Eliza pressed the fabric to her face, and when she lowered it, her eyes were shining with tears. Thank you, she whispered. There's one more thing, Silas said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the small silver ring. His hand was shaking as he held it out to her. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But I also know that I've never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. Not Adeline, not anyone. He took a breath and continued. I'm not a rich man, Eliza. I can't give you the life Marcus Harlan could have given you if he'd been different. But I can give you a home where you're safe, where you're loved, where your daughters can grow up free and happy. And I can promise you this. I will never, ever raise my hand to you. I will never make you feel less than you are. And I will love you and your children like they're my own blood until the day I die. He dropped to one knee, wincing at the pull in his ribs, and held up the ring. Will you marry me, Eliza Harland? Eliza stared at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she sank to her knees in front of him, cupped his face in her hands, and kissed him with a fierceness that took his breath away. Yes, she said against his mouth. Yes, 1,000 times, yes. She pulled back and looked at him, smiling through tears. You're not getting rid of me now, cowboy. Not ever. Silas slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. They knelt there together on the cabin floor, holding each other, while outside the wind blew and the snow fell, and the world turned cold and distant and completely irrelevant. They set a date for the wedding, April 15th, when the snow would be melted and the trail down to Black Mesa would be passable. Martha would stand as witness. Sheriff Wade would officiate. It would be simple, just a few words spoken in the cabin with the mountain as their cathedral. For 2 months, life on the ridge settled into a rhythm. Silas healed, Eliza learned, the children grew. News from town came weekly through Martha. Marcus remained in jail awaiting trial. Virgil Kane and his men had been sentenced in Denver. Judge Mortimer had quietly retired. The Harlan Trust Bank was being sold to pay Marcus's debts. Everything pointed toward closure, toward peace. But Marcus Harlan had other plans. He escaped from jail on March 10th. The details were murky. Some said he bribed a guard. Others claimed he had help from someone in town, someone who still believed his version of events. Either way, he was gone, and by the time Sheriff Wade realized it and sent word to the cabin, Marcus had a 12-hour head start. The warning came via a deputy who rode through the night. Silas met him at the door, rifle in hand, and listened as the young man explained. Sheriff says to be careful, the deputy finished. Harlan's got nothing to lose now. He's facing 20 years at least, maybe hanging if the judge rules it attempted murder. Sheriff's organizing a posse to track him, but they won't be here till tomorrow at earliest. Understood, Silas said. Thank you for the warning. After the deputy left, Silas turned to find Eliza standing behind him, her face pale. He's coming, not here, she said. It was not a question. Probably, Silas agreed. He checked the Winchester, made sure it was loaded. His shoulder was mostly healed now, strong enough to hold a rifle steady. But he won't catch us unprepared this time. What if he doesn't come alone? Eliza asked. Then we deal with it, Silas said, together. Marcus came alone. He arrived 2 hours before dawn, on foot, having abandoned his horse somewhere down the mountain. He was dressed in prison clothes, torn and filthy, his face gaunt with hunger and exhaustion. But his eyes burned with something beyond reason. He carried no weapon Silas could see, but that made him more dangerous, not less. A man with nothing to lose was the most dangerous kind of man. Silas heard him before he saw him, the crunch of boots in the snow, the ragged breathing. He went to the door and opened it, stepping out onto the porch with the rifle. Marcus stood at the edge of the clearing, a dark shape against the snow. For a moment, neither man moved. She's mine, Marcus said. His voice was hoarse, cracked. My wife, my children, mine by law and by God. No, Silas said, she's no one's. She belongs to herself. You've poisoned her against me, Marcus said. He took a step forward. You've turned her into something unnatural, a woman who defies her husband, a woman who chooses sin over righteousness. I haven't turned her into anything, Silas said. I just gave her the chance to be who she already was. Marcus laughed, a harsh, broken sound. You think you're better than me? You think you can give her more? You're nothing, a cowboy living in a shack. I gave her a house, servants, a name that meant something. You gave her bruises, Silas said. You gave her fear. You tied her to a fence post and left her to die because she couldn't give you what you wanted. That's not a husband. That's a monster. I loved her, Marcus screamed. The words echoed across the clearing. I gave her everything, and she failed me. She failed our family. She failed gang. No, Silas said. You failed her, and you failed those 3 little girls sleeping in that cabin. And you failed yourself, because somewhere inside you, you know I'm right. Marcus sagged as if the words had physically struck him. When he looked up, there were tears on his face, freezing in the cold. I lost everything, he whispered. The bank, my reputation, my mother, everything. He took another step forward. All I have left is them. Give them back. Please. Let me have my family back. For a moment, Silas almost felt sorry for him, almost. Then he remembered the barbed wire cutting into Eliza's wrists, the babies in the snow, the years of abuse hidden behind a veneer of respectability. You can't have them, Silas said, because they're not things to be had. Eliza chose to leave you. She chose to stay with me. And those girls deserve better than a father who sees them as disappointments. They're my blood, Marcus said. Blood doesn't make you a father, Silas replied. Love does, care does, being there when they're scared or hurt or happy. That's what makes you a father, and you were none of those things. Marcus stared at him. Then slowly something in his face broke. The rage drained away, leaving only exhaustion and defeat. He looked old suddenly, older than his years, a man who had built his life on a foundation of sand and watched it all wash away. I don't know how to be anything else. Marcus said quietly. My father told me a man without a son is no man at all. I believed him. I built my whole life around that belief. And when I couldn't have a son, I couldn't bear it. I couldn't bear the failure. Then learn, Silas said. Learn to be different. But not with them. You had your chance and you threw it away. Now you have to live with that. Marcus stood in the snow, swaying slightly. For a moment, Silas thought he might collapse. Then Marcus straightened, looked once more at the cabin, and nodded. Take care of them, he said. His voice was almost inaudible. Give them the life I couldn't. Be the man I wasn't. I will, Silas promised. Marcus turned and walked back into the trees. Silas watched until he disappeared, then lowered the rifle and returned to the cabin. Inside, Eliza stood by the fire holding Grace, the other two girls pressed against her legs. She looked at Silas, a question in her eyes. He's gone, Silas said. He's not coming back. Is he going to be all right? Eliza asked. I don't know, Silas admitted, but that's not our problem anymore. Our problem is what to plant in the garden this spring. Eliza smiled, a real smile, bright and relieved. Tomatoes, she said, and beans, and maybe some corn if the season's long enough. Sounds good to me, Silas said. He crossed the cabin and pulled her into his arms, careful of the baby between them. Sounds perfect. 3 days later, Sheriff Wade's posse found Marcus Harlan's body 5 miles down the mountain. He had not made it far. His tracks in the snow told a story Wade read like a book. Marcus had walked south initially, following the trail toward Black Mesa. But after a mile, the track stopped, circled, then turned north again, climbing back up the ridge. He had tried to leave, and then he had changed his mind. They found him sitting with his back against a massive pine tree facing north. His eyes were closed, his face peaceful beneath a dusting of fresh snow. He looked like a man who had simply decided to rest and never woke up. In his frozen right hand was a letter, the ink slightly smeared where snow had touched it. Wade unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was shaky, written with numbed fingers and failing light. To Grace, Roasted Clara. By the time you are old enough to read this, you will know what I did. Your mother will have told you. The man who raised you will have told you. And you will be right to hate me. I do not write this seeking forgiveness. I do not deserve it. I write only to tell you the truth I could never speak when I was alive. You were never disappointments. You were never cursed. You were perfect, and I was broken. My father taught me that a man's worth is measured by his sons, and I believed him. I built my entire life on that lie. When you were born, each of you, I saw only my failure. Not your beauty, not your innocence, only my shame. Your mother tried to love me. She tried for 7 years, and I punished her for my weakness. I hurt her because I did not know how to hurt myself the way I deserved. The man who saved you, Silas Thornwood, is everything I was not. He will teach you to be strong without cruelty. He will teach you that love is not ownership. He will give you the father I could never be. When you think of me, if you think of me at all, know this. My last act was to walk away, to give you the chance to forget me, to let you grow without the poison of my presence. Be good to your mother. She deserves happiness more than any soul I have known. Be good to each other. You are sisters. You are each other's first friends and will be each other's last. And forget Marcus Harlan. Let that name die here in the snow. Let it mean nothing. But never forget Grace, Rosa, and Clara. Those names were carved in wood by a man who loved you before he knew you. Those names are real. You are real. You are worthy. I am sorry I could not be the father you needed. I am sorry I could not be the man I should have been. Goodbye, Marcus. Wade folded the letter and placed it back in Marcus's coat pocket. He would give it to Eliza. Let her decide if the girls should ever read it. Some confessions were meant for the living. Some were meant only for the snow. He walked back up the mountain, one of the deputies said, studying the tracks. Why'd he do that? Wade looked north toward where Silas's cabin sat hidden in the trees. Because he wanted to see it one more time, he said quietly. The life he threw away. The family he lost. Sometimes a man needs to see what he destroyed before he can let himself die. They buried Marcus Harlan 3 days later in the Black Mesa Cemetery. Only the preacher attended. The town had turned against him when the truth came out, and even in death, no one wanted to stand beside a man who had tied his wife to a fence post and left her to freeze. But on the simple wooden cross that marked his grave, someone had carved three names beneath his own: Grace, Rose, Clara, not as a claim of ownership, but as a reminder of what he had lost, of the innocence he had tried to destroy, of the three lives that survived him and would go on to thrive long after his name was forgotten. Eliza cried when she heard, not for Marcus, but for what might have been if he had been different, if his father had been different, if the world had been kinder to them all. But she did not cry long. There was too much life to live, too much future to build. The hospital room was dark now, the winter sun having set an hour ago. Outside, the snow still fell, endless and gentle. Silas Thornwood lay propped against his pillows, his ancient face peaceful, his breathing shallow but steady. Samuel Jr. sat beside the bed, holding his great-grandfather's hand. The boy had tears on his face, moved by the story in ways he was too young to fully understand, but old enough to feel. "Did you ever regret it?" Samuel asked. "Saving her that day?" Silas opened his eyes. They were cloudy with age, but clear with certainty. "Every day I thank God I was there," he whispered, "because saving her saved me, gave me 80 years of the best life a man could ask for." "Grandma Eliza," Samuel said, "she died 8 years ago, didn't she?" "In 1950, Silas said. His eyes grew distant, seeing things Samuel could not. "April 23rd, spring morning. The apple trees were blooming. She went in her sleep, my hand in hers, just like she always said she would." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was stronger, clearer, as if the memories gave him life. "We had 71 years together, boy. 71 years that started in the coldest winter and lasted through every season after. We married in April of '79, right there in that cabin. Martha stood witness. Sheriff Wade said the words, and I promised her she'd never be cold again." "And the children?" Samuel prompted gently. Silas smiled. "Grace grew up strong. She became a school teacher, taught reading and writing to children all over the territory, married a good man named Thomas, had 4 children of her own. She always said she learned to teach because Eliza taught her that knowledge was freedom. Rose became a nurse, said she wanted to help people the way I helped her mama. She worked in Denver for 40 years, delivered over 300 babies, never married, said her patients were her children. And Clara." Silas's smile grew wider. "Clara was a firecracker, married young to a rancher named William Cooper, had 6 children. Her oldest daughter, your grandmother Martha, married my son Samuel." "Wait," Samuel just said, "you had a son named Samuel?" "Our first boy," Silas confirmed. "Born in 1880, a year after we married. Then came Hope in '82. We named her that because she was born during a drought, and Eliza said she was proof that good things could still grow in hard times." He counted on his fingers, the movement slow and deliberate. "Then Martha in '84, Elizabeth in '86, Margaret in '88, named for my sister, and little Anna in 1890, named for the niece I lost." "That's 8, Samuel said, doing the math. 3 from before you married, 5 after." "8 children," Silas repeated. 24 grandchildren. "And so many great-grandchildren I stopped counting after 40. All of them know the story. All of them know that their grandmother was the strongest woman who ever lived, that she survived what should have killed her, that she chose love when she had every reason to choose hate." His grip tightened on Samuel's hand. "You want to know the best part, boy? The very best part?" "What?" "Every single one of those children, those grandchildren, those great-grandchildren, they all grew up knowing they were wanted, knowing they were loved, knowing that their names mattered." Silas's eyes glistened. "Grace, Rose, Clara, they taught that to their children. And their children taught it to theirs. That's Eliza's real legacy. Not just surviving, but teaching every generation after her that every person, every name, every life, it all matters." He closed his eyes, smiling. "All because I found her in the snow. Or maybe she found me. I've never been quite sure which." "What happened to the cabin?" Samuel asked. "Still there," Silas said, "up on Black Mesa Ridge. Your father owns it now, keeps it for hunting trips." He paused. "Maybe someday you'll go there, see where it all started." "I'd like that," Samuel said. Silas's grip tightened on the boy's hand. Listen to me, boy. This is important. Don't ever let anyone tell you you're not enough. Don't ever use violence when kindness will do. And if you find someone worth loving, someone who sees you for who you really are, don't let them go. You hold on with everything you've got. You understand? Yes, sir, Samuel said. I understand. Good. Silas closed his eyes. That's good. His breathing slowed. Samuel felt the hand in his grow lighter, as if his great-grandfather was already leaving, already traveling to wherever Eliza waited. The boy wanted to call for a nurse, to do something, but he found he could not move. This moment felt sacred, private, meant only for the two of them. Grandpa Silas, he whispered. Hmm? Thank you for the story. Thank you for listening, Silas said. And then so quietly Samuel almost missed it. Thank you for letting an old man remember when he was young. The beeping of the heart monitor slowed more, and then between one breath and the next, it stopped. Silas Thornwood died at 11:43 on the night of December 15th, 1958, exactly 80 years to the day after he found Eliza Harlan tied to a fence post in the snow. Samuel sat with him for a long time, holding his hand, crying quietly. When the nurses finally came, they found the boy still sitting there, and they were gentle with him, understanding that something important had ended and something else, something carried forward, had just begun. In Silas's pocket, they found a photograph. It was old, sepia tone, creased from years of being carried close to his heart. The edges were soft with handling. The image faded but still clear enough to see every face. The photograph showed a house, 2 stories tall with a wide front porch, set against the Rocky Mountains. It was not the small cabin Silas had built, but something larger, something that had grown over decades. Apple trees flanked the steps. A barn stood in the background. Smoke rose from the chimney. And on that porch, 3 generations stood together. In the center, Silas Thornwood, at 74 years old, still tall, still broad-shouldered, his hair white but his frame unbent. His arm was wrapped around a woman, shorter, rounder, with silver hair pulled back in a simple bun. Eliza. Her face was lined with age, but her smile was radiant, and her eyes held the same fierce strength they had possessed that first night in the cabin. To their left stood 3 women in their 40s, clearly sisters. Grace in a teacher's simple dress, Rose in a nurse's uniform, Clara in rancher's clothing with their sleeves rolled up. Each had children clustered around them, ranging from teenagers to toddlers. To Silas and Eliza's right stood 5 more adults, the children born after the marriage. Samuel, Hope, Martha, Elizabeth, and little Anna, who was now 30 and held a baby of her own. 24 grandchildren filled the gaps, some sitting cross-legged at the front, others standing on the porch steps, a few held in their parents' arms. The oldest looked about 16. The youngest was the infant in Anna's arms. But it was the front row that captured Samuel Jr.'s attention. 3 wooden plaques hung from nails on the porch railing, visible in the photograph. Weathered but still legible. Grace Eliza Harlan Rose Marie. Harlan, Clara Ann Harlan. The same plaque Silas had carved that first night. 51 years old in this photograph, moved from the cabin to the big house, still honored, still displayed, still mattering. On the back, in Eliza's careful handwriting, were words written decades ago, but still legible. To my cowboy who found me in the snow, who gave me back my name, who taught me strength comes not from fists, but from standing when you fall. You are my winter, my spring, my summer, my fall. Forever yours, Eliza Thornwood. Samuel took the photograph. He would keep it, he decided, would frame it and hang it in his room, would tell the story to his own children someday, and they would tell it to theirs until the tale of Silas and Eliza became legend, became the kind of story people told around fires on cold winter nights. A story about a man who chose kindness over violence, about a woman who found strength in darkness, about love that began in the worst moment and lasted a lifetime, about the winter that changed everything. The snow fell on Denver, the hospital lights dimmed, and somewhere in the vast mystery beyond life, 2 souls reunited, young again, standing together on a ridge in Colorado where the snow fell soft and endless, and the world was new. The end.